slide, I've got a few objectives where we're going to kind of focus our discussion today. So we'll have a recap of what's going on with COVID. A lot of the topics that I've derived today are really basically what we've been dealing with over the last couple of weeks since this became a pretty huge pandemic, if you will. So we'll talk about working from home, temporary layoffs. You know, if you've hired people or you'd be looking to have people start with your organization because it was a very tough recruitment market. Now what do we do? And what supports are there in place from federal, provincial funding? And of course, you know, there are still those individuals, as we were talking about earlier with James, that feel unsafe. So how do we manage those? And of course, as I mentioned, the Q&A portion. So just to get started in terms of a recap, and we'll flip to the next, we'll flip to the next slide, to introduce myself and my team, who are all on the call today. My name, as I mentioned, is Luisa De Jesus. I own and founded the company LD Human Resources. We've been in operation for over 4 years, going into our 5th year next year. And what we do is essentially we support small to medium-sized business owners with any of their HR needs. So a lot of our clients call us the HR department. If you don't need someone full-time, then we're your answer, I guess you could say. We're your solution, whether it's to support with compliance or just overall general HR best practices, so you can get the most out of your people and most valuable asset to continue to operate and be productive and profitable within your business. And so that's exactly what we do. I've been in HR for over 20 years. I've got a lot of different experiences from larger corporations and small privately owned companies. Along with my team, if you want to flip to the next slide, we support every single industry essentially that you can think of. I think we've had the opportunity to support a variety of different industries, whether it's construction, telecommunication, marketing, retail, hospitality, insurance. It's quite a wide range. As I mentioned, and my team is on the call. We've got Nancy, Nadia, Julie, Christina, and Christina's, Carrie mentioned we got a Christina squared here. So very lucky to have such a wonderful team that's here beside me and along the way to support our clients. So let's talk about COVID. If we want to flip to the next slide. And what's the recap? Well, right now, there has been quite a number of things. As you know, it started in China, impacted many other countries that are still fighting the battle, and it's a scary one in many countries still, such as Italy, Spain, so many deaths, really. So today we've got an update, 170 new COVID infections with a total active cases of 837, 13 deaths this is just Ontario, and positive we've had 8 people recover. This is what's been recorded, but really we're not sure if maybe there had been other people that had contracted the virus and maybe have recovered already. Before this was really a well-known sort of outbreak, if you will. So with respect to the recommendations from the government, they've had the closure of borders, of course, stay home, practice social distancing. Most recently, they're giving that mandatory 14-day quarantine for travelers, and those who don't oblige, they've been pretty adamant about fining them or even jail time because it is that serious. With respect to the Ontario government, we are in a state of emergency. Only essential services remain in operation, or I should say open, or able to operate effectively as normal. Although I think that most businesses are seeing that there's not really much normal these days. So those essential services range from the construction industry to the food industry, transportation, health services, senior homes. But as you know, that a lot of the government services are closed, the courts, the schools, they've just even closed dog parks so that we can prevent the spread and flatten the curve. Most importantly, everyone should be implementing those health and safety precautions As my little picture says, you're safer at home. So make sure you're protecting yourself while you're in public. I was talking earlier saying that, I had to go to Longo's the other day, was wearing my gloves, in and out as quick as I can, trying to practice as much social distancing as possible. Make sure you're washing your hands frequently, keeping that two meters at a minimum. So let's flip to the next slide. But essentially, really, you should only be going out for essentials, so food, medicine, as much as you can. Now, when we talk about work from home, so a lot of our clients, when we started operating, they said, well, people don't feel safe. We want to do our social responsibility and encourage everyone to work from home as much as possible. Now, even though those essential services don't necessarily have to work from home, many are still doing that. So it's important to ensure that, you've assessed, are we technically capable to work from home, even with the Zoom calls, because there's so many people online and using cell phones to communicate these days. We're finding that there's some glitches in the system because I don't think the country was really supported and prepared for that. But we're doing the best we can. So making sure that those technical capabilities are in place, licensing, do people have laptops? If not, we've even had some clients just say, let's just take that PC home, and this way you can log in remotely. Whatever it is that can continue to operate your business is what you should be doing and trying to ensure is in place. But don't compromise your privacy, your security, your confidentiality. So, that doesn't mean that we take payroll files home for the person that does payroll, right? That's still a very important piece to consider, that you want to maintain that confidential information, whether it's, employees or clients, security information as well. A very important piece to implement is either, reminding your staff of your work from home policy, if you have one, or create one and develop a policy or a program so that it's a temporary measure, if that's not something you want to continue with moving forward once, things settle and you can operations kind of get back to their normal business practices. You may want to just call it a program instead of a policy. But so important to document that, clarifies the expectations for individuals to allow them to understand that my expectations of my performance are still in place. I have to be available for calls or emails during the core business hours. It's really important that you outline what that is so that it's clear for everyone. Or, same, if they're not feeling well or they need a personal day because they have something happening with their family, reminding people what to do in those circumstances as well. Getting into the next piece there is really to manage expectations. Manage expectations of your leaders and of your staff. The reality is, we're balancing as best as we can. I have my family here at home. I've sent them outside and told them to be quiet. But, some children at home, because the schools are closed, are much younger. You can't really have them be self-sufficient, depending on, perhaps individuals have, elderly parents that they're caring for that are at home, that no longer can stay in a facility or have the same supports that they normally would have because of the prevention tips, tactics that have been put in place for those individuals. So be flexible, manage expectations. Most importantly, I would say stay connected. So if you normally don't have a weekly call or a meeting, do that. Implement that connection so that your staff feels part of the community. Perhaps set up a WhatsApp group where everyone can kind of still have that camaraderie that they would normally have in the office to keep that social well-being in place. You want to continue to be that employer of choice and be flexible and stay connected with your team so that their mental well-being is at the most positive level it can be, because it's a very daunting reality out there. So let's flip into the next slide, which we're talking about temporary layoffs. So as I mentioned, some individuals really we don't have the capability to work from home. We have less work to do because of the decline and how the economy has impacted us. So, there's really no other choice but to either reduce our workforce or sometimes even shut the doors, depending on what the financial impact is to your business. There are a number of leaves from job protected leaves that have been in place and that are, under the Canada Labor Code that due to COVID have been implemented as well. So, for example, there's medical leave, compassionate care leave, that's related to critical illness, reservist leave, bereavement leave, personal leave. So there's a number of different things that apply for those who are either sick, self-isolated, or in quarantine because of this situation that we find ourselves in. Those who have a shortage of work, we may need to temporarily lay them off. We'll get into documentation, some risks around that, because there are some businesses that it's a normal practice. For example, in the industry of construction, it's a normal practice. It's part of their industry that temporary layoffs are acceptable and assumed. However, other industries may not necessarily have that as part of their normal practice. And if you don't have an employment offer that indicates that you have a temporary layoff clause, you could essentially be subject to legal implications down the road. Although you have to understand and know your team best. If they would prefer to be temporarily laid off so they can support their family, that's important to note. If they would maybe rather work less so that they can keep connected, that's important. But navigating through the legalities of that can be very, very tricky. So just keep that in mind, that documentation is going to be really important to reduce that legal risk. There are different things that the government has put in place to support those workers. And so employment insurance benefits are ones that have had some flexibility and new supports for individuals that find themselves out of work. They've waived the 1 week waiting period and the requirement for a doctor's note for those who are sick, in quarantine, or self-isolating. There's also something that just came into play yesterday, actually. It's called this CERB, or Canadian Emergency Response Fund, or Response Benefit, I should say. And it's really a result of this pandemic. So it could be for those who have, again, sick, quarantined, lost their job, or in self-isolation. What the government is doing, it's a taxable benefit that's going to provide $2,000 a month for up to 4 months. So the period of March 15 to October 3rd is what it is right now, where it could support those individuals for that period of time. And it could be it's either employment insurance or this a Canadian Emergency Response Benefit that individuals would be able to apply for. And this also includes those who perhaps are self-employed or contract workers, those maybe who may not necessarily be receiving the income but are still employed, for example, in sales. And so these details were just released yesterday. They're going to open up the applications for that in early April, and expecting that it will be a simpler process than employment insurance application right now with a 10-day turnaround. The reality is those portals are overloaded with respect to employment insurance benefit. Even on the employer side, we have some of our clients logging in at midnight just to process an ROE so that the individual on their team can take advantage of employment insurance benefit. And so this is an opportunity to have a supplement or an option that's other than that for those individuals that we find in that circumstance. So if we flip into the next slide, we do have those workers that feel unsafe, right? What do we do in those circumstances? You know, maybe someone, I saw there's a lot of memes going around right now, right? With trying to stay positive, and you know, someone sneezes and everyone's freaking out. It could just be that they had a tickle in their nose, or it's allergies, or they normally, you know, before this sort of escalated, I was at my gym and one of the members, she coughs and she literally turned, it's a smoker's cough, guys, right? So there is still that very uncomfortable feeling, which is socially understandable, where people feel unsafe. And it's important for you to communicate. send out those emails, have calls, let them know what measures you're putting in place, and encouraging and really mandating for your staff to keep that social distancing, really go out when they only need to, and ensure those health and wellness strategies are in place. Stay connected, as I mentioned, to in terms of keeping that mental health going. Remind them to, not look at the news every minute. Check in once or twice, distinguish between what the worries are, what the facts are, what the truth is, right? Practice self-care, wake up, get some physical exercise in there, stay hydrated, eat well. And maintaining that routine is always key, that we hear from our medical professionals and our health and wellness professionals, I should say. But for yourself, to stay connected, have those jokes, laugh together, have those weekly team meetings, as I mentioned in our other slide. So I'm just going to flip over to the second last slide, I should say, before we kind of get into a little bit more details about the government supports. But, the reality is it's been very, very tough recruitment market before COVID hit us. And so it was so hard to find the right person. You finally got them, and now they're supposed to start. Now what do we do? So if you're still recruiting and you need that person, I would say consider if it's effective to have them start working remotely, or if you can onboard them effectively. You want to set them up for success. You want to have the leaders there beside them to train and allow them to understand what the expectations are so that they can contribute effectively to your company. And so for those situations, you just need to have those considerations. For those that many of our clients are finding themselves in is, we're in a downturn. How can I have this person start if I'm looking at layoffs for my own team, which is very understandable. There could be legal implications depending on whether the individual was left a full-time job and has already quit and really is subject to leave. Although those who maybe didn't have another job, it's a matter of having a conversation and trying to navigate through the legal implications of that, because you could perhaps take advantage of their skill set in a different way, and they may be okay with that, but really deferring things is the best option at this point, but keeping in mind that there could be legal implications to whether you've had wherever that candidate has come from. Okay, so if we get into the next slide, final slide before we're going to get into the Q&A, because I want to allow a lot of time for that, is there's so many programs that the federal and provincial government has put in place in terms of funding. So both to individuals and to businesses. So there are existing programs that have just really been enhanced, and there's also new programs that there have been in place. So support to businesses, there is a work sharing program, which is a supplementary or unemployment benefit, if you will. So if you have a reduced work week, then the government will compensate for the other days to a certain threshold with those individuals that are on a reduced work week. So allows the employee to still work, maybe less financial income provided by the company, and then the supplement for the government to provide on the other side. There is a small business wage subsidy that employers can take advantage of through their payroll. It's actually a way that you apply that is through the payroll costs, so it's a reduction there. There's business access to credit for companies in a number of different ways, and financial and tax flexibility. There has been a deferral of personal taxes, which and other credits and opportunities for businesses to take advantage of when it comes to, for example, cutting interest rates or different subsidies that the government has put in place for businesses. For individuals, there are a number of general supports. They've increased child care benefits, extra time, as I mentioned, to file income taxes, mortgage support, improved access, as we talked about, to employment insurance. Now this Canadian emergency response benefit, So other emergency support benefits, those for other improved access to sick benefits, emergency cares, and some GST credits. I also, was watching the news the other day. There's we're all going to have less on our energy bill. A little bit, I think, as much as the governments can do, they're doing the best they can. I think we need to be thankful that we live in a wonderful country that has these reserve funds, that they're able to offer this. And they do have glitches along the way. They're trying to navigate through it, but there's a number of different opportunities that we can take advantage of for those, again, who are low to modest income seniors, students, deferral on having to pay back their student loans and things like that. It's never going to be enough. We want our life back to normal is the reality. And we really, I think, don't want to be scared anymore to go out to work and have our dinner parties and go to our concerts and really contribute and be part of that work and social community as we once had. That ends the presentation portion or the communication of some updates for you. Hopefully it's provided some insight and answered some of your questions. But I am open to, of course, questions. Now we've got a half an hour of the session left.
So I've just unmuted all of everyone.
Great. Hey, Louisa, it's Nitin Badwar here.
Hi,
Great,
Nitin.
great presentation.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Sorry, I'm not on video, but that's a break for you guys.
You're right, Nitin.
Oh, thank you, Gary. Listen, a couple of quick questions. The first one is to do with work share.
Yes.
Do contract employees qualify for that? Can we include them as part of the work share application? As long as they're working full-time and have been for a long time?
I haven't really navigated through that in terms of whether contract employees are. I don't see why they wouldn't, because they're part of your payroll,
Right.
As long as they're part of that program. But we'd have to look at, it is quite an extensive application. The reality is with WorkShare, what they've done is they've extended, at this point the government's communicated that they've extended those who are already part of the program. Hasn't really talked a little bit more about if they're going to be relaxing the requirements and the eligibility for those to apply new applications. I anticipate that will come.
Right.
But at this point, I could get back to you on that in terms of contract workers, but I would assume that if they're on your payroll and they're working full time,
Yeah.
then they would be able to participate in the program.
Okay, great.
Can I interject? Can you hear me?
Yes, sure.
Just to add to Louisa's comment, I'm Nadia Lambo, by the way. I work with Louisa with LD Human Resources, and pleased to meet you. So essentially with regards to contract employees, they would, unless things change, as Louisa said, and things are navigating through, they would qualify under the WorkShare program. However, what needs to be demonstrated is that the work that they're conducting is not seasonal.
Correct.
So
Yeah,
if there's, for example, loss of revenue or loss of income from a business perspective due to seasonality, and so, when you're working a lot and you hire contract employees,
yeah,
they would not qualify.
no.
But
no,
if you have individuals who are on regular contract employees,
Yeah.
they're effectively active employees.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
No,
Hey,
and
thanks,
that's
Nadia.
Yeah, and that's the latter is our case, because I mean this is all COVID related.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you both.
Okay.
Just another quick question is about the student support. Were you talking about just in terms of deferring student loans and stuff, or is there something that's in play?
Pardon? What was the question?
No, I said, is it just to do with deferring student?
Yes.
Okay,
This is
okay,
for
nothing
individuals.
else.
Nothing else. No.
Okay, gotcha.
I mean,
Thank you.
what we have seen though, Nitin, is that if you've got a co-op worker with you, a student, employed by you, the universities are supporting ending those contracts early, given the circumstance. typically it's not very good on an employer to end a co-op opportunity for students because they're not getting, they need that to fulfill their credit. But so the universities are being, and the colleges are being flexible given the circumstance as well.
Right. Yeah, no, I was just being totally centered over on that one. We got two daughters graduating in April. I'm just wondering.
Yeah,
what else
there might be a
happen.
tax credit that comes out, you never
Well,
know.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, good thing is neither of them have any student loans. So I was just wondering what other support is available for them, like getting a job.
Not, yeah.
All
Although
right.
we are doing still co-op recruitment for those who
Are you?
started this
Okay.
summer. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and the reality is there are a lot of jobs out there still that, drivers for these takeout companies. I think Amazon hired a whole bunch of people as well, because the most grocery stores, right? A lot of businesses are in need of staff. It's just a very uncertain time that do you feel comfortable going out there and working, right? But there's those options. There is still employment. If there's still employment for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, good stuff.
Any other questions?
I've got two quick ones, if that's okay.
Sure, Gary.
We work in a seasonal business at the golf course down the street from you guys. And this past February, we did have some layoffs. Their callback dates would be the middle of May. Now, subject to what happens in terms of golf courses and essential businesses and all that neat kind of stuff, we might not be able to meet the callback date.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that we're going to get some license from those types of issues because of C-19?
In terms of having not recalling them at the time that they're
Exactly.
supposed
Yeah,
to be?
we likely will not be able to recall them inside of the traditional, in this case, the
Yeah.
13-week period, the initial part. We may have to extend because of C-19.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident to say that they have extended that period for those circumstances, but we'd have to wait for more information from the government to see what they're doing, because it's really day by day, right? Right now, you have people hoping that things will be cleared by May, but as even with theater companies, for example, right? It's unknown because we have no cure, so if you think in terms of reasonability, right, if we want to be reasonable, I don't think that there's much reason if you can't call people back because we're in a state of emergency, then there's going to be some flexibility. I was talking to one of my clients yesterday about this because, the reality is there's always the risk. There's always a legal implication. There could be, constructive dismissal claims.
Right.
It's really unprecedented territory. And we don't know, because there hasn't been a case yet, what the tone will be, what the stage is set for these individual circumstances. So truth will be told, but all we can do is try to navigate as effectively as possible. Those individuals that you have out, I would just maybe issue them a notice saying, due to the current circumstances, we may need to defer your date. And hopefully, if the layoff benefit no longer is something that they can take advantage of, there's this emergency response benefit that they could take advantage of if that's been exhausted and they haven't extended it.
Right.
So really just doing your part in communicating and being honest with your team versus them saying, well, I heard nothing except for I'm not going to be there in May, right?
Great. I got one more as well, is that in one of the screens earlier, you talked about compassionate leave of staff or maternity leave, that kind of stuff. Well, we have an employee who cannot work from home. It's impossible. Who's been laid off, whose spouse will have a baby in the next 5 or 6 days.
Okay.
Is there any, do you foresee any way that we can give him additional assistance in terms of, can he take a part of that paternity leave during this section of time? Do you see any way that we can enhance his experience in these times?
So he's laid off and he's going to be, I guess, taking the temporary layoff from an AI perspective.
Yeah.
Um,
But it just kind of twigged me when you were going through the screens and there was a section there you talked about compassionate leave, or I think it talked about maternity leave. And
yeah, so
does the paternity side of it maybe factor into this just a little bit, that we can even be extra helpful?
it may, it really does depend on his specific circumstance, how many hours he has to be able to qualify, right?
Lots of those. Yeah. No
Yeah.
issue with hours or anything
Yeah,
like
so
that.
I'm not sure if you can take advantage of two benefits at the same time,
Okay.
and how that would play out in his particular circumstance.
Gotcha.
The maternity leave, it's actually called parental leave benefit,
Right.
because both parents can take so one is called pregnancy leave and one is called parental leave. So the pregnancy leave is only permissible for the child bearer, if you will, the
Sure.
mother,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
take. But the parental leave can be either or. So I've seen in many circumstances where the mom and dad are off at the same time,
Okay.
because the father has taken the parental leave and the mother has taken the maternity leave, the pregnancy leave.
Right.
So, he may be able to qualify after his temporary layoff for the parental leave. It really depends on his individual circumstances.
But he couldn't double up, likely.
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
Great. That's all I have. Thank you so much. And thank
No
you, Karen, for putting this together for us. I really do
Yes, thank
appreciate it.
you.
Sorry. The other thing that he might be able to take advantage of, and Louisa probably touched on it earlier in one of her slides, and I'm not sure if it would be considered doubling up, but it might be the Canada Emergency Response Benefit,
Okay.
where it
Yeah.
is the $2,000 a month. But it
Right.
does not fall under the EI.
Right.
Yeah, we have to wait until April for to come out,
Exactly.
because I don't think it would allow you to double dip like EI or, right? Because there's only so much money that the government can give.
It's gonna give.
It's almost like the toilet paper, like leave it for everyone else too, right? Any
Great,
other
thank you.
questions?
We've, just so everyone knows, we've put up on the Stouffville Chamber's website, if you go to the homepage, there's a whole bunch of links to different resources and information. So
Right.
we tried to compile it all in a few pages, but there's tons of it there. So use those resources.